Hello and welcome to the Cargo Bay. Wait, this says Star Wars Conversation
I just
podcast, but
scratched that
today
out.
we're gonna do something a little different. Today we're gonna talk about our favorite Christmas movie, Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring.
The
I
most
am Brady C, here with my co-host as always.
Adam B. How you doing, BC?
Boy, I'm excited about talking about the best Christmas movie of all time with you.
Yeah, nothing makes me feel that Yuletide spirit more than LOTR.
Loader.
Loader, as we used to call it.
Yeah, yeah. This it's I feel a little wayward here. Normally we are talking Star Wars, but we said, you know what? It's our show. We can do whatever the heck we want. And we got the holiday spirit here in the Cargo Bay, and nothing says holidays to me like Fellowship of the Ring. So I think that's what we will be discussing today, and I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, I mean these movies came out around Christmas. They got
Yep,
snow in them.
yep, yeah. Though there's snow. That's Christmassy.
They're long. They're good for being cozy. I think that's what it really is for me. Is like, when else are you gonna have a better situation to nestle in and watch a 3 to 4 hour long movie than the holidays?
It's true. Yeah, this was released. Uh, Digging through the archives, December of 2001.
Wow, good golly, I was, I thought it was 2003 for whatever reason. And 2001 just makes it even more of a thing of like, how does this hold up? I still don't understand.
Well, the world was a very, very strange place in December of 2001, fresh off of the terrorist attacks of 9/11,
Oh, wow.
uh, which I
That's
don't
how
think our young brains really processed at
no,
that time.
that's how kid brained I was. That there's no there's no like surrounding political landscape I'm considering this movie in. It's just like warm fuzzy times.
Yeah, no, and it's so true that it is just warm fuzzy times for me. But I think that's what is great about it. It's an escape movie,
Yeah,
like for all of the stuff that was going on in the world that I mean we were partially aware of. I mean, I don't think we could really understand the full impact of a 9/11
no.
at the time in 2001. I mean, I was like a freshman in high school or something. So, this was perfect escapism from anything that would have been like things are wrong in the world. It's like, okay, well, let's let's go to the movies. Which there's a lot of movies from around like the post 9/11 time that are really like
Bad.
impactful, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
bad. But like Lord of the Rings, I vividly remember Spider-Man being a big
Oh,
thing for
yeah,
me that came
yeah.
out in 2002. So like
Episode 2, of course.
yeah,
Star Wars
yeah,
Episode 2.
yeah, classic of modern cinema. So I mean, all of those things sort of exist in that kind of escapism realm for me, which
Yeah.
I was at the perfect age for anyway. So yeah, I mean, this is like it's like throwing on a cozy blanket whenever I go back and pop on Fellowship of the Ring.
That's kind of what I look for in general in media still. I still have the kid brain. I mean, truly, if something is set in the modern world, I am so much less likely to partake. Like, I was listening through the Dark Tower series recently, and I was like a good 2 3 hours into the audiobook, I think, and then it cut
Mhm.
to like a skyscraper in Manhattan, and I was like, I'm out. A hard pass. Like, not
No.
interested. I don't. I was having a good time out in the gunslinger weird West stuff. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, that is funny to imagine that a lot of people were watching this movie and drawing parallels between the darkness seeping back into the world and
Oh, I mean, yeah,
terror and the
yeah,
terror.
of course, yeah. I mean, it's it's all allegory for something.
Yeah.
Which I think Tolkien famously was like, "This is not an allegory for World War One. Stop,
Oh, really?
stop it."
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, totally, totally. That where he was like, "No, I can see where you get that, but stop doing that. That's not what this is." It's like, all right, Jr., but we all know what you went through, so maybe it seeped in
There's
there. I
some
don't
stuff in it.
know.
See, listeners of the podcast may or may not know, I grew up the son of a preacher man, and so, I watched my dad took me to this movie, and I was
Yeah.
reading the books and all that, and he was, he always talked about, well, he and C.S. Lewis were great friends. My dad
Yeah.
loves C.S. Lewis.
Right.
We got, Chronicles of Narnia, sure, but he also has some other like theological,
Screw
screw tape
letters
letters,
and
stuff
yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was like, yeah, they were drinking buddies. They'd go drink and talk about Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings. And he was always like, yeah, Frodo is the perfect, like kind of figure, this kind of Christ-like figure who has this thrust upon him. And he was always like, Frodo's definitely gonna die at the end. He had never read it, but he was just like
The
Frodo's
guy's
gonna.
he's got spoiler alert. Frodo's got to go.
He's got to go because he's Christ.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
The burden that he's bearing is a little much.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was a fun thing to enjoy with my dad. 3 hours was a bit long for for my father to enjoy a movie, but it was something we could talk about growing up.
I mean, we've discussed this a little bit before, but this was not on my radar at all as a thing that I wanted to see. Right,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Whenever like all the Lord of the Rings stuff came out, I was like, I'm over it. Like I was like, I don't care. But it was my mom who had known the book, and even like back to the animated movies, I'm sure, was like, we're gonna go see this, and I was like, fine, whatever. She's like, she's like, I'm buying tickets. We're gonna go, and we got tickets to a movie theater that I had never gone to before in Little Rock. It was like, I forget what it's called. It's like the Cinema 150 or something, but it was just one screen. So it was one of the. It was like it wasn't an IMAX screen, but the movie theater itself was just one huge screen. So like it was a special occasion where she's like, we're gonna go to a good theater where
That's
it's a
awesome.
really big screen, and we're gonna sit down and watch this movie. And I was like, hey, fine, whatever, man. And like basically as soon as the movie started, I was like on the edge of my seat. I was like, go on,
Yeah,
tell me
what
more
an
about this
intro.
world. Yeah.
It's so great to have that intro because it takes a little bit to heat up after that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good that it comes in swinging with the action for your for a little teenage brain to be like, oh, okay, I see where we're going.
I mean, it's the movie is so perfectly crafted. I think, like going back, like I watched, I'm like, oh, this is just masterfully made, where it does draw you in immediately, and then it settles you into the world of Hobbiton, right? So we're gonna go into the Shire, we're gonna do all that sort of stuff, but it does give you that whip of action, the history of the ring, like you get all that up top, and then we go into like, I mean, the score too is perfect for setting the mood for everything. But like the like whimsical music of the Shire, just like,
Yeah,
oh, this is kind of fun, this is nice.
yeah.
But the way that it's paced and it just unfolds in front of you, like I don't know. Whenever I watched this, because we were preparing to talk about it, I watched this a couple weeks ago. The pacing of it, and I don't know why, but for the most recent time, reminded me of like, this is weird, and people can say this is wrong, and I don't care. But it reminded me of like an Indiana Jones movie, where it's like you go from place to like once the movie really gets rolling, you're going from place to place, and something exciting or meaningful is happening every like 5 to 10 minutes, which is
Yeah,
very much that like serial style of pacing, which is not the books. Spoiler alert, everybody.
yeah, yeah.
But for this film, like, just keeps you like wanting more because you know you're going to get to the next thing. And then by the time this movie was over, like we're at hour 3, I'm like, more, let's go. And they're
Yeah.
like, no, the movie's over. You
We
got to
gave you
leave.
3 hours.
Yeah, I was like, that was 3 hours. That's longer than most movies. The movie's over. Wait until next year. I was like, no, that can't be the end. They barely just started this journey. We've got to get to Mordor. We got to get that ring into that thing. We got to go do this. Like I had bought so completely into this world by the end of the movie. I had like, I will always just be like, kudos, mom. You knew exactly what you were doing when you're like, we're gonna go see this on the biggest screen I can.
That's almost an identical experience. I saw the trailer for the movie in the theaters, and it was a big epic trailer, and I, as
Right.
a fourth grader, was like, this looks stupid, this looks really dumb, look at all these people and their haircuts and their self-importance, like,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
them cresting mountains and like kind of looking over each shoulder, and my
Yeah.
mom was like, you're going to love that, you idiot.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'll buy you The Hobbit. And I was a lazy child, so I had an inconsistent allowance, and I was always hungry
Mhm.
for objects. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, get me The Hobbit. So I read The Hobbit and loved The Hobbit before the movie came out. So I was on board at that point, but I still wasn't expecting it to be like, I don't know. I didn't think I was gonna love the movie as much as like a Star
Right.
Wars. But yeah, my mom didn't take me to the theater. I don't know that she had read Lord of the Rings or just knew that I would be, a sucker
Totally
for it.
into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my dad took me, and yeah, I kind of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or sorry, not the Last Crusade, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. At least it also does a trick of like it gives you a full movie and then another full movie. So it was like, by the time they got to Rivendell, I was like, man, what a movie. That was awesome. I wish there was more, and then it was like, oh, well, we're going into act
Yeah.
two here. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they do just keep delivering. I mean, it's just hit after like it's like you sit there and you're like, "Oh, I love the prancing pony. Oh, Weathertop scene. Yeah. Oh, we're in Rivendell." It's like you just go from location to location. You're just like, I love everything about it. Like going back and watching, I'm like, what's my favorite part? I don't know. I love each one more than the next. Like it's just the way that those like everything is of the world, but they have their own feeling, like their own it's like style and stuff that like hits you in a different way, but all lives in the world of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I completely bought into the world, fell in love with it, like became mildly obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Like as soon as I got out, I was like, I gotta go get these books.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I like I remember going to Hastings, a
Oh,
fine
Hastings.
institution in its heyday, and getting like the 3 book box set that had
Yeah.
the box art was it was the race being like wiped out by the horse
Yeah.
river.
Okay. So these were the painting set, because there was like the movie photo covers, and then there were like the concept art images. Or this was also a still from the.
This was a still from the
Okay.
movie, and then I'd have to go back and look at because I mean I still have them, but each book had movie stills on the cover, and yeah, I remember because I wasn't a big reader at the time, being in high school and like having access to like a PlayStation and stuff, so
Yeah.
was like. I'm like whatever on the whole reading thing. But as soon as I got those books, I was like, I became like weirdly more dedicated to my schoolwork because like I'm gonna do my homework right now so I can go read Lord of the Rings for 3 hours before I go to bed, which
That's
was a
awesome.
really wild swing for me because like I got to finish my homework so I can go read Lord of the Rings, um, which was a totally different experience from the movies, obviously, but is so rewarding too that like you can love both of them. I think
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I think you can obviously there's huge differences between the two of them, but I think the movies exist perfectly in a cinematic world and the books are perfect on the page, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a near perfect adaptation, because there's no way to do the books in the spirit of the books perfectly without it being like a huge, long, multi-season TV show, whatever. And a lot of the changes a lot of the big changes I like, I like Arwen taking
Yeah.
Frodo. Like, that's one of my favorite sequences in Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
Love all that. I like the elves coming to the Helm's Deep.
Yep.
That's that's cool. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There are a few changes maybe that I don't agree with, but mostly it makes sense as far as building a movie to me and kind of
Yeah.
cluing people in. And I'll also say that while I like the extended versions and they're fun to watch, I think that theatrical cuts are generally they're better versions of the movie as far as like a
The-
piece of cinema,
oh,
like,
yeah.
to
No,
tell a story.
yeah, I absolutely agree. Because I normally I watch the extended editions because I'm a glutton for punishment, and they just exist in my brain as part like an important part of the Christmas tradition of like
Yeah.
because the DVDs would come out around Christmas, And that was like a standard gift. My parents would be like, "We got you the extended edition." I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
remember
I
getting that first extended edition box. I think I
Ooh.
didn't get the first. I didn't get Fellowship extended. I got Two Towers extended though, and that like leatherish, like
Yep. The big
green and
thick
then red and
green.
blue.
Yep.
Like yeah.
Yeah. I still have those somewhere. I've upgraded. Someone was giving away a bunch of Blu-rays that I knew, and the
Nice.
entire set of Lord of the Rings extended editions. I was like, yeah, I'll take your Blu-rays, if
Yeah.
only just for this one. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
she's like, I don't want to store these anymore. I'm like, I'll take them because
Yeah.
it means I can have that sweet Lord of the Rings extended edition. But yeah, I was always an extended edition watcher, but this most recent time I was like, I mean, 3.5 hours, 4 hours is long. I
Yeah.
was like, I'll watch the 3 hour version, the one that I remember from sitting down in the theater, and it's perfect. Like even at 3 hours, it clips along so well.
Yeah.
The extended edition does have fun stuff in it, but it's not all like necessary. It's just like they shot so much footage
Yeah.
that's like you can put it in there, but the
And
way
the,
that the
the
theatrical editions are paced is basically pitch perfect.
and the I think the effect shots that they cut are at a lower quality than the ones
Yeah,
that are kept in. And that's I still am just blown away. Like from that opening sequence, it's immediately like this is really early CG tech,
yeah,
and it looks great. The way that it's kind of I think it's the way the scenes are painted. Like a lot of later CG is all
yeah,
gray and washed out, and this it kind of looks like the characters like the matted in characters look kind of like models on the model set too. Like it all just kind of feels correct. It doesn't look awful. It just is like, wow, I can't believe this holds together from 2001 and a not huge budget considering it's 9 hours of 10 hours of movie by the time it's done.
yeah. I mean, to think that the tech, I mean, it's aged, right? Like
Yeah,
obviously it's not as like clean or crisp or whatever, but it still holds up. And I mean, you can still watch it and be like, it's we've progressed in technology, but it doesn't like knock you out of the story or anything.
no,
It's still there. It's still good. I think I want to go off on a tangent here for a second. One of my favorite things about the extended edition DVDs that came out was all of the like supplemental and bonus material that came with it.
yeah,
Like the disc
huge
3 and
huge amounts
4,
of that. Right.
like all of that, watching those taught me so much about one, like storytelling, but like filmmaking too, because they go into so much detail about like the design process, all of that, which I mean, previously, I don't think we would have really had access to, but like DVDs were like the thing at that time, right? In terms
Yeah,
of media, because this is before like any streaming services. So like movies were making so much money off of one, the theatrical release, but also DVDs were such a big part of the film industry, which is part of why film is dying now because no one's buying the physical media.
yeah,
But the amount of like care that they took to put into those extended editions where they're like, here's how the sausage was made, here's how the model makers did this shot, here's how like all of these locations were scouted, here's how we filmed this stuff. Like you can get a good like crash course 101 filmmaking just from watching the extended edition bonus materials where they talk about, I mean, it takes you through the design process, through like shooting, through casting, through visual effects, like editing. Like it goes through all parts of making the movie. And that's the most recent thing that I watch because like I like watching that as much as I like watching the movie, just because how much detail they go into about the storytelling and how they actually did that, which is where I got the information about the troll and his anatomy that we were talking about
yeah.
beforehand, where it's that cave troll, pre-animatics, swinging ding, just swinging around. But it shows all that really early technology where like Weta started because they're shooting movies in New Zealand and they're like, we don't want to hire some other visual effects place, like we'll just buy the computers and start doing it ourselves. And like that was the beginning of visual effects in New Zealand filmmaking because of Peter Jackson,
Yeah,
and it turned into like a massive visual effects house
yeah.
because of this.
Yeah, and I mean also like the physical. That's what's crazy about it in this era, which I think we're returning to that the era of like mixed digital with actual physical,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah.
production. But they were also making armor sets. Like
Yeah.
it's just wild the level of production. Yeah, those bonus features. I mean, I know people who like cite that as like the reason I wanted to become a filmmaker was
Oh,
because
totally.
I watched the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings bonus features, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, they go into all of the like forced perspective shots
Hmm.
and how they're like they go through camera movements and how they film all the forced perspective, which is super interesting because so much of it's done in camera where it's like, yeah, because I was watching there's a shot of it's in Bag End. It's with Frodo and Gandalf, and the table itself is built into like a crazy forced perspective. Part of Gandalf's table is actually built on a dolly. The
Yeah,
camera's on a dolly that's tracking the movement so that the two portions of the table are always lined up and they're in perfect perspective. And you're just like, what the hell did I
that's
just watch?
they put
Like it's
more
camera
work into
magic.
that table shot than I've ever put into anything in my life. Yeah, and
Anything,
it's
but like,
like,
so like, we'll just do a two shot and a wide. And then they're like, no, we're going to get this forced perspective in one shot where they're both going to be physically present. And Ian McKellen's like tracking his eye line because you can't be looking at the other actor and keep that forced perspective. So, like, the way that they're figuring it out all in camera, I mean, there's a lot of other effects that they're doing, like they're blending shots and stuff, but the ones when they're actually shooting that forced perspective in camera blows my mind.
yeah,
Where
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, we'll just build a moving dolly that part of this table is on, and it's seamlessly going to look like they're in the same location because the table's always lined up because the dollies are tracking in opposite directions as this camera is making this move. And you're just like, what kind of wizardry is happening? Like, there's so much of that stuff that, like, now you go back and you can be like, oh yeah, I can kind of see where it's like, yes, that's the insert of the 7 foot guy's hand on, Elijah Woods' shoulder. But
yeah,
at the time, it's like I just bought into all of it. Like, I was just so in the world, and knowing the stuff doesn't take me out of it now, or didn't even take me out of it then. I was just
yeah,
like, it's so cool that they can do that,
yeah.
and there's information that they're giving to an audience. Where like, here's how we did a lot of this stuff. That's relatively simple to figure out if you've got the time to do it.
I wish, yeah, I wish that the industry, had had taken those lessons, and but now I just feel like nothing like this will happen again. I mean, I guess Avatar is happening. There are massive, huge projects taking place over many years, but I don't know. I think this for a long time is. I mean, I guess forever is going to be a unique classic that kind of nothing else is like. Um, Still haven't seen anything like it, and just the ensemble cast and the fact that they were working together for like 3 years or however long it
Yeah.
was, and
Well, like principal photography was like 16 months or something or whatever it
yeah,
was. And then they always came back for pickups, It's like that's a crazy commitment as an actor to take on.
yeah, and that's I think it's on those DVDs, but it's something like Viggo Mortensen was called and had like a couple days to decide or something if he was gonna take the role, and his son was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, you need to play Aragorn. See you
Dad,
in 16 months."
this is super cool. You have to do this. Yeah. I mean, he because what Stuart Townsend or whoever was cast as Aragorn, they're like,
Whoever that was.
we think he's too young. We might have made a mistake. And they call Vigo Mortensen. They're like, basically, you've got a day to let us know if you can be out here.
Man.
And then it was his son who was like, yeah, Dad, you should probably take the role as the kick-ass ranger in this huge movie that's going to be made, because he knew the books. And so it was like, yeah, you should. That's the coolest part. You should go do that. And then he does, and it's just like immediately like thrown into like sword combat, and he's like shooting fight scenes and all that kind of stuff. Like, I can only imagine how much fun it must have been to shoot an epic like this.
Yeah, I'm super jealous. Jealous,
Yeah.
but also like I can't imagine much of this cast being replaced. Christopher
Mm-mm.
Lee playing Saruman, famously wishing that he was playing Gandalf, and it's
Yeah.
like, no, Ian McKellen is Gandalf, you're a
Yeah.
Saruman, it's perfect. So like, there's not.
The bad guy from all the horror movies. Yeah, you're gonna be the bad guy.
But
I mean, Ian Holm as Bilbo. He's
yeah,
so much fun in the beginning. I mean, Ian McKellen
yeah,
is perfection
yeah.
as Gandalf. Nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I think he maybe should have
Yeah,
won.
he should have won, man. I tear up watching him on the bridge, not because of what's happening to the character, but just that like a man at that point in his career doing a fantasy movie could give that much to a green screen or whatever. It's just like it
He's
shocks me every time. I'm like, wow,
he's
this is awesome.
I mean, he's such an inspiring actor, but like to me, I'm bought into him always because of. I mean, he's so theatrical and he's so Shakespearean, and the way that I think he uniquely translates that to film, which I don't think everyone. I mean, not everyone can do that, but the
It
way that
takes a
he's
certain
able,
gravitas
yeah,
to
and
be
it
able to
really
pull that
like
off.
oh,
Yeah.
it 100% takes a certain amount of gravitas, especially. I mean, but you've got so much license when you're in a fantasy world and you're playing a freaking wizard,
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you've probably done King Lear at this point. You've played some great Shakespearean kings. Like, you know what it's like to occupy space and really use your voice. And his level of commitment in this is like part of what sells it. And I mean, he's just so good, from the entrance, it just being like fun and whimsical to every part of what he does in this movie. I don't know. I love Ian McKellen.
And I think the most direct translation from the books into the film is Gandalf. Like Gandalf to me is exactly the same as he is in the books. Like it just
Right.
feels totally correct.
Yeah.
Aragorn wasn't as cool in the books to me as he
Yeah.
is in the.
Well, like his scene when we first encounter him, like, he's the mysterious figure
Strider,
in the
yeah,
corner, Strider. Most folks call him Strider. And you're like, well, who's that? I've never heard of that guy before. That sounds really cool. And he's like scary and a little bit dangerous. And then you come to realize, oh, good guy, he's gonna be the king, whatever. Like, but then the intro that they build cinematically is so good because of what they wanted was exactly the reaction that they got from me. Was like, oh, this guy's dangerous, and we're at a very dangerous point in this story, right? Like, the Black Riders freaked me out,
yeah,
even at like my advanced stage. I was like, that's some scary stuff. Like the imagery, the sound of all of that. I was like, oh, that's terrifying. And then they go into this like bar, and there's this figure in the dark smoking in the corner. You're like, okay, this seems dangerous. Seems like we're about to be on a really dangerous adventure. And he's the one who's going to end up being, of course, like the great protector, but like that sort of storytelling beat where it's like, hey, we don't know what this is, but we're going to make you feel something about it. Is just, I love being manipulated that way.
yeah. The same way they then manipulate you into being like, oh, Sam just got stabbed by a Black Rider. Which
Yeah.
that sequence I saw
Frodo, but
recently.
yeah.
Well, I no, specifically Sam, because when they stab the beds, it cuts to Sam like waking
Oh,
up
yeah.
as if he's been stabbed, and they play that out for a
God, what a
long
great.
time before they pull back the
God,
sheet.
it's so crazy that
That
they.
that
That's a.
sequence is taken from the animated movie. It is like almost plays out exactly the same. They were just like, yeah, that was good in the animated movie.
We're gonna
Let's
keep
steal
that.
that little.
It's so. Yeah, it's a minor thing that I almost forget, but you're like, oh man, they do give you a second where you think that like the hobbits are asleep in bed and they're just getting
Yeah,
murdered,
yeah.
straight up murdered.
Yeah, I was totally fooled by it
Yeah,
when I watched it in the theater.
they did the old look the other way trick on us.
Yeah, I watching this again, and every time I watch it, I think maybe my favorite like chunk of any movie ever is the intro through to Moria and through the exit of Moria.
That's so good.
It's my favorite part of the books too. It's great in the books, but to be able to pull that off and that the action holds up, that it feels like a real place that they've been in for days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so cool. And that fight sequence when the music cuts out and it's all just, clanging swords and
Yes.
so it's really
Ching
good.
chong ching chong ching ching. You're just like,
Yeah.
whoa. Yeah. There's so many good like I went back and was just like, I love the Hobbiton sequence. I
Yeah,
love all the
yeah.
stuff in the Shire.
And
Like,
that's one of the parts there's a lot of good stuff in the extended cut of
yeah, there is.
extras, like sitting around
Well,
and
that's fun
smoking and stuff.
because it's all just like building the I don't know, sort of the ideal world that we're not going to be able to return to. That the dream of whatever that is has to be destroyed. But like, it's such just like a pleasant world. You're like, it'd be nice to live there.
Yeah, it'd be a good place
Hey,
to retire.
that would be a lovely place to
Yeah.
retire. Yeah. I don't know. It's whimsical. Rivendell is all good.
Yeah, all the the production of what elves are is really good. Their swords are super cool, by the way.
Yeah,
All those elven
yeah,
swords. And then really I think that the orcs crawling out of stuff like cockroaches and the
God,
swarms of them,
that's Jesus.
that CG, that was new. I remember them being really proud that they could put like 1,000 bodies, like on a
Yeah,
screen. But it's like none of that pays off if you don't have like 300 people in makeup as well, and all these
yeah.
cuts to like really, like varied. Like they're not
Terror.
stormtroopers. Everyone looks
No,
different.
they all have an individual. They have a similar feel, but they're all unique in design. And man, thinking about that shot too, whenever they're surrounded in Moria,
Yeah, yeah,
heroes done for. How
yeah.
are they gonna?
The most
I
D
remember.
and D looking like shot in any movie.
I remember the exact feeling I had of like the anxiety of them being surrounded, being like, they're gonna have to freaking fight their way out of this, aren't they? How are they gonna do it?
Yeah,
Then the Balrog comes and you see everyone fleeing. You're like, what the hell is that? Like,
yeah, yeah.
and then it just gets better, and like every
The
part of that
slow
sequence.
glow coming through that
Oh my
massive
god,
like.
it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah. All the and of course our what's his name, John Rhys Davies, who will be
Oh
returning to Indiana Jones 5.
yes,
Love that he
yes.
got to be Gimli. Like, and that is one of the fun things about watching the main cast of this film is it's like everyone who was in this movie loved being in this movie and is perfectly fine with it being maybe the highlight of their career forever. Like at
Yeah.
least it seems that way to me. I've watched a lot of interviews with these people talking about it, and everyone's like, "Yeah, this was really cool, and now I'm set." Like,
I got to do that, which not everyone gets to do. To me, this is the theatrical equivalent of like when Star Wars came out in 1977,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
this it had the same. I don't. I culturally, I think it's obviously it's a little bit different, but on a personal like theatrical experience, it had the same impact that I imagine it had on someone who would have been my age going to see Star Wars for the first time in 1977. Where I was like, you can do all of these
yeah.
things.
Didn't
Like
know that was possible.
yeah, it just opened the world of possibility. When you talk about, you know, this is like high fantasy, like the way that it was realized was kind of a miracle that they pulled it off in the way that they did. Because I became like obsessed with it. Like I just fell in love with everything about it. It was like, I have to know as much as I can about this world. I want to dive into the books. I want to know like what the actors think. Like I would check the onering.net
Yep, yeah, I
daily for
remember.
my Lord of the Rings news, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's very similar to Star Wars to me in that like sci-fi was cool or whatever, and then Star Wars was like, wow, this is like the full version of what that could be, and
Right.
the fun kind of like romp that can be. And I felt that way about fantasy, where I was like, I like swords, I like
Yeah.
I like the
Yeah,
idea of all
swords are
this
cool.
stuff, but
Bows and arrows are cool.
there hadn't been a lot of movies that drug me in.
Yeah.
Mostly I was bored by stuff in that genre. And then watching this, I had the crisis of like, do I like this more than Star Wars? What happens to my identity?
Yeah.
um and watching the last time I rewatched these, I watched them with my fiance for the first time, and it'd been a few years, and I was worried it wasn't gonna hold up. I think we wound up watching all three in like 1 or 2 days. I was just like,
Solid.
I think if I try to make this a little bit objective, like I think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is probably the best trilogy ever committed to film. Definitely in a fantasy or sci-fi,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
world. It's it's obviously a story that's stood the test of time. I mean, it is incredible what Tolkien did. Kind of creating this modern myth
Yeah.
that's like,
Yeah. Well, it's like that was his undertaking because I mean, I mean, I don't know as much as I should, but I mean, in terms of like his history with like language and like old tales, like
yeah,
he set out to create mythology,
yeah,
right? Like that this was in its own way was like let's there's the Arthurian legend, like let me do something that's like that, like, and then he built the most massive world in his brain and put it on
yeah.
paper with like languages and histories and lineages. It's
And
like
too many songs, perhaps.
too many songs and poems, like the amount of content. Shout out to J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the original content creators. I mean, the amount of content that he was able to produce around this world is just like he had a lot of time on his hands to do this,
Yeah.
which was amazing.
And maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it was written by an old white guy from an old white guy's perspective, like but
Yes.
that aside, it's a pretty incredible work of art. And the kind of the way these characters speak translates well into the film, and
Hmm.
I don't know, it is really fun both reading the books and watching the movie. Like everyone has such cool lines. Like the hobbits don't as much, but Aragorn just sounds cool as hell every time he says something.
I like I don't know, some of Gandalf's lines. I'm like, just tattoo that on my body or something. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like wisdom, where it's like it makes sense that he's thousands of years old or whatever it
Yeah.
is. I was like, it just has a fount of knowledge and wisdom where it's like it's nice to be able to have those kind of epic lines that transcend the world of fantasy and into the everyday.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I think about those quotes all the time, and how they apply to my life in certain instances, and I mean, they resonate, and there are things that's like I don't just like passively sit back and think about this. Like that's a meaningful thought that I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
dive into and unpack, and spend a little bit of time in reflection, which is not something that everything does.
Doesn't happen with a movie that I love, like Star Wars Episode 2, quite as
No,
much.
no, not as much.
When you came out of the theater, did you have a favorite member of the Fellowship?
Oh, Aragorn, 100. I
Yeah,
mean, I was like 100% on for the kick-ass dude with the sweet sword who did all the good fighting. It was like, yeah, I was 100% on board with that.
yeah. I think I've come around to, Aragorn's the best. But when I was a kid and I watched this, I came out being like, Legolas is the coolest,
Oh,
coolest
yeah,
character ever. He's got those twin knives are so
yeah.
cool when he does the little flippity flips, and he's got a bow. And he
Did
also, when he's walking on the snow, is cool. Just him being an elf and otherworldly was very neat to me.
did you play the EA games that
Oh my
eventually?
gosh. Yeah,
I played those for hours,
my buddy and I
hours.
co-opt through those
Yeah,
games over and over. We would
yeah,
we would
I
have
know.
sleepovers. We'd like watch the
Yep.
movie and then stay up all night and play
Yeah,
those games. I
100%.
They're so good. That
Yeah,
I just learned those games were made on the Tiger Woods golf engine. they'd,
sweet.
they'd been like they'd been trying to build an engine for like a year and it wasn't going well, and then they looked at Tiger Woods golf and they were like, those are really big open areas and there's like a castle at the end. Perfect. Like
Amazing. I remember specifically one time I found, I don't know if it's like a glitch in the game, but there's one place, and I think this was in the Return of the King game, where it's like outside of Gondor, where it's that middle Minas Tirith, I think. Um, No, I forget what it was, but it's like it's this spawn area for all these orcs that come out, and if you don't go through the gates, they'll just keep spawning orcs. So
Yeah.
it's like it's where I went to just like perfect every single like combo that every character had, and Legolas was the most fun to play with on that game because he had the double sword, but also the bow and arrow too. Where it's like he had the coolest like animations with the two swords,
Yeah.
and then he also had the bow and arrow too, where you're like, oh, this is, I don't know. I would just camp there and be like, I'm gonna kill it and perfect all of these combo moves.
And they had the voice cast was all the real cast. I remember just being shocked. The thing I remember most is I always played as Legolas, and he had a move where he would pull out the knives, spin them twice, and he would stick them in the neck, like either side of an orc's neck, and
Yeah,
the orc would get stuck. And he had like he tried
and
to
he
kick him
kicked him
off
out.
once, yeah, and it
Yeah,
like didn't get all the way off, and then he had to
yes,
kick him off the knives, and I was like, wow, that's
yeah.
the coolest, most brutal thing I've ever
That's
seen,
sick.
man.
I would play those games right now. That's how
I
much
I recently bought the Two Towers because
nice.
I'm borrowing a GameCube,
Nice.
and so I was trying to convince Paulette to play play with me. I don't think I'll be able to get her to do that. But
Couldn't go
but
over, huh?
yeah.
All right.
But yeah, man, those games were so cool. And also just licensed games outside of Star Wars were always so awful. I was like, I can't believe it. It's like a good game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this was the era of like video games. Some of them were just old crap, but
Yeah.
these were so good because I mean they had like little animatic cutscenes too.
It would
Like I
fade
don't
from
know,
the movie scenes into the game, and it
into the
looks
game.
pretty rough now, but at the
Oh
time it
yeah,
was like,
but in
whoa.
like 2002, it was pretty sweet. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you're like, oh, Boromir's shield was in film and now it's in the game, and we're gonna go do the end of the Fellowship. Yeah, because they tacked the Fellowship into the
Two
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 Towers
hours,
game.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
You go
I
through
spent
the
so much time playing those games.
starts with Weathertop. You get to cut the tentacles off of the beast in the water,
Yeah. Yes.
which yeah, there's a sequence that could just be total trash from 2001 and holds up pretty good. I like watching them cut them tentacles up
Yep.
in the water. That is one thing in the books that you can't capture in the movies is the introduction to that creature is just like, you know, talks about like something seeping into the water thousands of years ago or whatever and like some dark thing. I don't know, it's very very well described in the books.
I mean, it's uniquely suited for Peter Jackson's talents too. Of like, oh, we're gonna do a horror monster.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah, yeah.
let's do a horror monster in Lord of the Rings.
Still can't
You can
believe
tell he had fun.
he managed to get the funding for this. Like, I'm gonna make 3 movies all at once. It's gonna be expensive.
You know, it's wild to think because this and Spider-Man, where it's Peter Jackson and Sam Raimi, who don't have like big budget action stuff, but what they do have is like experience with like effects in films, even if it's like low budget horror. They're like,
Yeah,
we've always been working in effects, so like we've been progressing with like effects as they go through, and they're hitting at the specific time where it's like the blend of reality with the computer stuff, where they're just like uniquely situated. I think probably as filmmakers would be like, this is where we're going. It's like that's got to be why they got those jobs, you know, on these huge budget movies, like massive amounts of money
yeah,
being poured in the project. Is like, well, you guys seem to know what you're talking about with all of the cutting edge effects that are going to be needed for this sort of stuff. It's my favorite thing about those extended editions is like the talking about how they do the effects and are blending it with like that beautiful air of like we're still gonna carve a giant, you know, fourth scale miniature of whatever this is,
yeah,
how those technologies were existing together. They talked about the specifically the Rivendell set where like we were essentially just going to use this for a wide shot, like to establish Rivendell, big wide shot. We built the entire huge miniature, and then like it was so good that we could start putting the miniature into the digital effects background shot. So like they're getting shots of this miniature and using it to like splice into the actual like green screen and stuff. Like, man, we just shot with the miniature and just put it in the background. You're like, God, it's so good.
It
It's so cool.
those the kind of like, yeah, all the floating camera stuff in the
Yeah.
trilogy through that looks incredible. There's the most dated things don't even bother me, which I think are the use of like strobe. There's a lot of like kind of strobed action in the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
which is kind of like seeing a wipe in Star Wars, where I'm like, that's cheesy, but I like it.
Right.
Like, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
um, and there was something else I was gonna mention that is a similar kind of technique. I guess it's sometimes the way that things they add glow to things is very
Mm.
like of the digital effects of that
Right.
era, but it I don't
Yeah.
know, it fits in universe to me, so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. I mean, it's the technology's dated, which is why I love it. It's why I love watching the original Star Wars and seeing how dated that technology
Yeah.
is. It's like I don't care. It's of an era, and it just makes me love it even more for what it was at the time. You know?
Yeah. And it's not just a CG palooza with no impact. It's also a ton of shots of like actual, athletes whacking half metal swords together.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty wild.
And to bring it back around to the socio-political, that it spoke to something in the time of like yeah, I don't know. I still haven't processed the fact that most of my youth growing up was like, "There's a war on terror." I'm
Yeah,
like, that
terror,
doesn't make any
terror.
that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me. Like we're fighting terror. Like, why don't we fight anger and fear too while we're at it? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, well, I guess we'll fight terror. But that this did speak to like a very clear good versus evil,
yeah,
and it's I don't know. It is funny that Tolkien was like, "It's not World War One." This is not the good guys and the bad guys, but it translates to everything, and the fact that it was, in that time something that was like, hey, we need some good guys, we need some heroes in the world. I played very much into where I think we were as a society of just being like, oh, America just got dealt a huge fu blow, and it's like we didn't know what that meant. I still don't really know that I processed that in any meaningful way, but it's like at the time I was like, oh, we could really use some good guys because we're fighting terror and evil everywhere.
and it might be inside the Fellowship.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
terror and evil might be. That's what resonates with it with me now is I think what Tolkien intended more, which is like when they're talking about evil, coming back into the world and the elves leaving and the magic
yeah,
dying. It's like, yeah, that's what I mostly feel is like the deforestation and the
yeah,
like the loss of like basically the environment of Earth, like the slow
yeah.
destruction of our natural resources and beauty. That really like that's what I felt watching it this time when they're kind of like talking about like, oh yeah, the Middle Earth
Eh,
is dying. It's like
yeah,
there's evil industrial forces that are
very, very. I mean, if you look at, I mean, part of the industrialization too is a huge part of Tolkien's childhood because I mean he you know grew up in a very industrial part of England where he was like saw the forefront of of just how fun it was to be a part of the Industrial Revolution,
yeah,
um, which I can only imagine was brutal in the early days before a lot of like regulation. And the other thing, and I think the thing that resonated with me too this time is the corruption that power presents, specifically with Boromir's story, where
yeah,
I was always like, oh, he's just kind of a d bag, but it's like
right.
he's trying to fight this menacing evil that they've never been able to defeat,
That his
and
friends and family are dying to like
yeah, it's like, hey, we've been trying to kill this thing forever. What if we just take that thing and stick it on our finger and wipe it out? And it's I don't know, it his arc I was a lot more sympathetic and empathetic with
yeah.
Bor and have become that way more. Yeah, this is not a like cut and dry like, and it's not easy for. I mean, they build it in with Aragorn too, where it's like he's got to release that idea from his mind when he lets Frodo go at the end. but the struggle for that Boromir specifically has with it, you're like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense why he
Yeah.
would be drawn to the most powerful thing that could defeat this surging evil
He,
that's rising in the world. But by doing so, you will become that very thing. Like you cannot escape that, which I think is relevant forever.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever watched that the scene, in Rivendell, the way I watched it this time, where it's like, yeah, man, here I am in your fancy Rivendell where you live forever. Like, I don't really care what you think at all. Like, I need this ring, dude.
It
Like,
is a gift.
yeah, yeah. And that plays out really weird because I watched the extended cut. I usually don't. That plays out really weird in the extended cut because Gandalf has just like spoken the black speech in Rivendell and like made like the sky turn dark, and Boromir is still like, it's a gift. Like right afterwards, he's like, nope.
We need that.
Yeah.
What if we use it to stomp out the evil that's been lurking for generations?
Man,
Yeah,
that shot where
love
they're
it.
actually on the mountain in the snow, and he picks up the ring out of the snow on the chain. It's like,
The
so
shot
good.
is amazing, and the fact that it's actually a ring that's this
Yeah,
big, like the
yeah,
size of your head, so they could get the shot. You're like, ah, man, I wonder who's got that prop right now,
yeah, yeah.
because it's such a good shot of that ring sitting in the snow. They're like, well, we can't shoot it with a ring that would go around your finger. We got to make a big one. Like, I don't know. I love all those camera tricks that they do.
Yeah, man, what a great way to spend some 3 hours.
Yeah,
Which do you have a favorite of the trilogy? I'll say this one's my favorite.
I think it is this one. It's the one I watched the most.
And it's not to say anything negative about the two that
No,
follow.
no.
Growing up, the Two Towers was always my favorite. Because I
Yeah,
like Helm's Deep.
I love Helm's Deep.
Super super cool. But now I have changed my mind. I'm now a Fellowship person.
Yeah, yeah. It's just got so much like nostalgia and whimsy for. If I ever just want to feel like warm in my soul, I'd be like, I just throwing Fellowship.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, I don't know. It's always going to occupy that space. I think in my heart and my mind as a viewer, it's just like something that exists as a pure like good for me.
Yeah. And as I've gotten older too, I can also appreciate the physical beauty of Aragorn more. Like I wasn't as a kid like, "Ooh man, this guy is hot." Like I watch it now and I'm just like, "God damn." Like that dude looks great in these
That's a
movies.
good looking man.
He's a good-looking dude.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, maybe this will be a little Cargo Bay tradition, BC. What do
I
you
think
think?
so. I mean, we love the Christmas season here around the Cargo Bay, and nothing says celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ like Fellowship of the Ring to me. Yeah, so I mean, I will more than gladly look forward to watching Two Towers next year for our annual holiday Lord of the Rings escape. Um, so yeah, I mean they exist as Christmas movies for me because they are so heavily associated with like the Christmas season. That's
Yeah.
when they came out and was like after this one I'm sure that I was there opening day for the Two Towers. Like there's no doubt in my mind
Oh,
that I would have been like
I
ready to go.
I don't know if I had the means to be there opening day. I in
Right.
fact I remember having to wait a while to see Return of the King even and just being like maybe a week or something.
I remember getting out of a final, like a midterm or whatever, right before the Christmas break, getting out of the final, and one of my buddies he was like my go pal at the time. We were just like, we just got out of this final, like, hey, you want to go see Return of the King, dude? He's like, yeah, and like we went and watched a 3.5 hour movie, and I'm sure got out at like the middle of the night after having got out of school, and we're like, let's just go watch Return of the King
Yeah.
because it's out, and we just loved it. We're like, just go watch it.
And
Yeah,
good time. I must have been at Return of the King early enough because I remember it was a packed house, and I remember at the end of the movie when Gollum took the ring, someone behind me said, "It'd be funny if he tripped and falled." And I
Paul.
said, yeah, and he said it super loud, and I turned around and said, "That's what happened in the book," because it is what
It's
happens in
got,
the book.
yeah.
He trips and falls. But I also wanted to mention we have a tentative date with our friends Normies Like Us, the podcast, to
Oh.
do a little Star Wars holiday
Oh.
special.
Oh boy. Do you think the little housekeeping? Do you think you and I could arrange to watch that together?
Oh yeah, maybe do a little Discord watch it.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you,
I've never seen it before. The only thing I've seen is the Boba Fett animation.
well, it does not go fast. I'll tell you that. It is not an Indiana Jones like experience. So yeah, I would be glad to watch it with you, so we can at
Amazing.
least talk about it.
And when are we doing that?
I think that's on the 17th. Well, I'll let
Okay.
you know off pod.
Okay, great.
We'll figure it out.
All right, cool. Yeah.
But right before we get out of here, right quick, there was a new Indiana Jones trailer.
Oh,
So that's exciting. Gonna have a new
Yeah.
indie film.
I'm 1,000% in on de-aged Indiana Jones
Yeah,
and anything that's going to happen in this movie.
yeah, I'm down. I'll be there opening night, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, more to look forward to out there. But anyway, that's been our holiday episode of the Cargo Bay. Happy holidays to you out there, whatever you're celebrating. And I guess we'll be back next week with something or other, right?
Yeah, something or other. We'll figure it out.
And maybe we'll be opening some cards on the YouTube channel soon. So check us out there. And until next time, bye forever.
Bye, y'all.